This is the aftermath of the terrible tragedy where the Midianite women and Moabite women were allowed to entice the Jewish men, leading them to both harlotry and idolatry. As a result, thousands of Jews perished. And then a census is taken. And when it talks about the different families of the tribes, there's a discrepancy between the way it's mentioned in this week's parsha and in an earlier section. One of the tribes, the tribe of Gad, had a son, and his name in this parsha is called Ozni, which means my ear. In an earlier parsha, the same person is known as Etzbon. And Rashi says, I don't understand why the name changed. And Rashi doesn't give an answer. When Rashi doesn't give an answer, that means he couldn't think of a simple answer, because Rashi, in his commentary on the Torah, is directed to a simple, straightforward understanding of the text. But when Rashi says, I don't know the answer, he means to say you have to go to other parts of Torah that deal with the underlying spiritual meanings of the text, and there you'll find an answer. And indeed, the Shalah, one of the great sages of the 17th century, gives a beautiful explanation. And he says as follows. The word Ozni, as I just mentioned, means ear. Etzbon is related to a Hebrew word which is etzba, which means finger. What's the connection between ear and finger? The Talmud makes a very beautiful connection. The Talmud asks, why did God create the fingers that are tapered? They go to a point. Because if someone hears negative talk, gossip, slander, immoral talk, they should take their fingers and use it to plug their ears so they shouldn't have to hear the undesirable verbiage. That is the Talmud's explanation why we have fingers and ears. The fingers are there to plug the ears when necessary. So the Shalah goes on to explain, when you look at the tribe of Gad, who did the tribe of Gad travel with? Because the Jewish people were divided into 4 camps, and each camp had 3 tribes that traveled together, and one would suspect that the tribes that traveled together had influence over one another. So the tribe of Gad traveled together with the tribe of Reuven and the tribe of Shimon. Now, if we remember what we just learned in the last few weeks, we know that these were problematic tribes. When Korach started his rebellion, who joined him? 250 prominent leaders of the tribe of Reuven. The main rabble-rousers, plural, was Dasan and Aviram, who were always causing trouble. They were from the tribe of Reuven. What about the tribe of Shimon? Well, we just read in last week's parsha that the leader of the tribe of Shimon, Zimri, consorted with this Moabite princess, Cosbi, and brought disaster, catastrophe to the Jewish people that caused them to indulge in immorality and in idolatry. So Reuven and Shimon were problematic tribes. What about Gad? Gad was the 3rd tribe. Nowhere do we find that Gad was influenced negatively. You know why? The Shalah says, because Etzbon, they had the ability to put their fingers, literally or figuratively, into their ears. They knew that you're supposed to become immune to negative speech, impervious to the negativity that comes out of the mouths of such vile people. They knew that they would not be able to withstand the pressures, so they plugged their ears, and when they plugged their ears, they were unscathed. What about Reuven and Shimon? They unfortunately succumbed to all the pressures, and they sinned, egregiously so. But after all that happened to them, after Korach's rebellion came to an end and they were swallowed up, and after the Midianite disaster came to an end, and the Jews did tshuva, they repented, then the tribes no longer had to plug their ears. They had graduated into a more heightened period, where they could leave their ears open, because there's a disadvantage to closing your ears. The disadvantage is that you don't hear the cries of a child. The disadvantage is you don't hear the words, inspiring words of Moshe Rabbeinu or of any other of the teachers. If you close your ears, you're not receptive to the needs of others, but you have no choice, because if you don't close your ears under those circumstances that we just read about, we just spoke about, it'll drag you down and you won't be able to accomplish anything positive. But that took 2 stages. What is the lesson for us today? We are living in an age when we can't afford to wait. The Talmud says this world is like a wedding. Just grab and eat, grab and eat. And the Rebbe always explains it means in ancient history, in past history, things took place slowly, methodically, from one generation, one century to another, sometimes from one millennium to another. You couldn't change the world just in a split second, or certainly not balance two different and opposite experiences at the same time. But we're living in a period, we're so close to the end of time of exile, we're ready to dance into Mashiach. We don't have the luxury to wait until we maintain a certain standard, until we accomplish what we have to accomplish, until we achieve our goals, our spiritual goals, and we're no longer vulnerable. We have to seize whatever opportunities there are. So when it comes to plugging our ears, and I'm talking about this literally and figuratively, there's a lot of garbage being spewed through the media, whether it's the official media, the social media, all the immorality, all the nonsense, all the foul talk, and so on and so forth. It's important for us to plug our ears so that we are not going to be influenced by that negativity. But at the same time, there's so much positive information out there. You have the internet that produces tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Torah classes. Right now, we are engaging that medium. So can we afford to just plug our ears when our youth is so thirsty for hearing something that makes sense to them, something that is spiritual, something that is uplifting? So we have to just seize opportunities. Yes, we have to learn how to close our ears to negative talk, to slander, to lashon hara, to gossip, and so on. Certainly to vile and immoral talk. But at the same time, we have to be prepared to remove that finger so we can hear the words of Torah, to listen to words of refreshing Torah knowledge. And it's interesting that the Hebrew word for balance, izun, is related to the ear, ozen. Ozen is ear, ozni. And it's not a coincidence. It's probably the reason why balance is the same word or related to the word that means ear, because that's where our balance comes from. It's from the ears. We have to learn how to balance ourselves because in a certain sense, we are more advanced than our forebears. Our forebears could only do one thing at a time. They couldn't walk and chew gum, as the saying goes. We can do both. We are challenged to do both. We're challenged to be resistant to all the negative influences, but at the same time, we're challenged to open our ears wide to hear all the positive talk, all the words of Torah, because we are right at the verge of the coming of Mashiach, and we don't have time to get rid of all the evil that exists in the world, and then we'll start listening to the positive. We have no luxury to do that, so we have to learn how to balance ourselves, and that we will certainly do.